All right. Now, to understand how that Islamic world came about, we're going to have to go about and see how Islam entered our world. Now, to do that, Islam entered the world of the Byzantine Empire. After the German barbarian tribes invaded Rome, they set up their own version of the Roman Empire. They retained classical culture. They spoke Roman. They hired Roman philosophers and Roman attorneys to teach their children and to run their schools. They came into the Roman Empire not to destroy the empire, but just to get the goods for themselves. The eastern part of the empire, so-called Byzantine Empire, is over here. Now this is after the German invasion. The important point is this: there was still a classical empire. It's not collapsed. Here we see in 25 years, 3 stages of development of the spread of Islam. This is 25 years' work. How is it that the Arabs were able to do to the Byzantine Empire what the Persians could not do in Iran? Here's the answer to that question. It has to do with Iran, actually. The Greeks and the Persians had been having wars since forever. So the Byzantine Empire, when Islam invaded, had been weakened by a long war with Persia and the loss of 1/3 of its population. The economy had collapsed by 2/3. So we had an empire that was weak, invaded by people with a mission. Now what's important here is these 3 different shades of green represent the different caliphs. This empire is beginning to build here came from people who could be described as the apostles of Muhammad. Egypt is the breadbasket of the Mediterranean. Syria, the heart of the intellectual world of the classical empire. In 25 years, the classical civilization lost its ability to feed itself and lost its biggest brain trust. This destroys classical Christianity. Why? This destroyed the heart of it, transformed it. The first stage of the annihilation of classical empire, gone. The heart of it's gone. Okay. A century later, notice over here in Spain, 750 AD, Spain is already Muslim. And this, in particular, the database of ancient documents, gives us 548 battles that Islam fought against the classical world. Every tick is 20 years. The new battles for that 20-year period come up in white, then they fade to red to show you the history. So white's what's happening right now, red has happened. Let's see how these 548 battles act out over. We're going to watch, in 70 seconds, we're going to watch 1,200 years of conquest. Look how fast this is happening. Bam! Here comes. You didn't know France was hammered that hard, did you? You heard of Tours and the islands. Now, many of these raids or battles, if they're at the coastline, are slave raids. The slaving that took place in here was extensive and went on and on. All of this work is also happening now then. We're now into the golden age of Baghdad. This is the punishment that's being handed out to Christians everywhere. In Spain, after one battle, there were knights' heads were cut off and they made a pile so high that a man on horseback couldn't see over them. All of the European civilization in North Africa is now gone.
I have a question. Have you read the 13th tribe?
No.
Okay.
Now, pretty soon, and by the way, there will be a period of time, and you can see the clock running up here, there will be a brief blip of 5 battles that occur in North Africa, the Barbary Pirate Wars. We're on there. Okay? Now then, Byzantium has fallen. Now then, Eastern Europe is being hammered. Notice that it is relentless. It doesn't stop. This is the history that you're never told about. This is the history that explains how all of this came about. Now then, they're getting slower because Islam is becoming weaker. Corruption. All empires collapse from the inside ultimately. Okay. I say that what caused the collapse of classical civilization was not the invading German barbarian tribes. I say that classical civilization was destroyed by Islam. Now we know this from history, the data. Rome used to communicate with France by boat. After Islam, they went overland through the Alps. Why did they do that? There was no longer freedom of the sea. A brag. The Christians couldn't float a plank on the inland sea. What did this do? It isolated Europe and impoverished Europe. So, you know the business of the Barbary pirates? You know the business of the Somali pirates? Same. It is Sunnah. It is Sunnah, the way of Muhammad. There's a famous hadith which is repeated endlessly, in which Muhammad awakes in a dream and he sees his jihadists sailing the inland sea. Islam always practices, where possible, economic warfare. Muhammad attacked caravans. What was attacked in New York? Ooh, Trade Center. This, economic warfare. I am an admirer of Islamic civilizational war methods. They're superior to everyone else's thinking in war. They use everything for war. Everything, including the womb. This was an economic jihad. There were three, you've heard of the Dark Ages? Well, there were three Dark Ages. One in Europe, one in Turkey, one in North Africa. You weren't told that, were you? I wonder why. What was left for a European economy? Furs, lumber, swords, and slaves. We're now really getting to one of the points where we don't want to know this history. Anybody here all real proud about how some of your ancestors were taken off a coast in Italy and then put into a harem in North Africa? And now you have children from that who are distant relations? You see, you may have distant relations in the Arab world you don't know about, because 1 million Christians were sold into slavery. All right. Now, the other thing we're told that's so bad about Christianity and so pitiful about those poor Muslims are the Crusades. First off, Islam, remember, destroyed 30,000 churches. The Jews and Christians were dhimmis. There was infinite number of brutality against Christians. Christians were fleeing the Middle East, and the Byzantine emperor appealed to the Pope, help us, please. Now, this was a big thing to do, because the Byzantine emperor and the Pope did not get along at all. But these were desperate people. And what did the Pope look out and see? This is the world that he saw in 1100, the time of the First Crusade. Well, let's see. This much of Spain is Muslim, and we're getting our behind kicked on a regular basis. Oh, well, this Christianity's gone. Oops, this Christianity's gone. And look at all the battles in the non-Christian, in the areas that are still Christian. Do you see the geopolitical problem that the Pope was facing here? This was not just some, we'll saddle up, get on our horses, and go steal from them Arabs, which is what you're told. This is the political picture. But now then, let's do this. Let's look at a battle map for the Crusades. let's be fair. I showed you the jihad map. Now here comes the crusade battle map. We're almost done. That's it. Now we're told that the Crusades are the moral equivalent of jihad. And therefore we need to be ashamed and whine and cry. All right. The Crusades were defensive, lasted 300 years, and the last one was over 800 years ago. All the jihad was offensive, lasted 1,400 years, and it's happening right now. In all probability, some Christian is being slaughtered in Nigeria today. Now, is this moral equivalence? No. The Crusades were one of the few times the church put steel in its spine, and then we apologize for it. That's the world today. I've now explained to you how this world came about. It came about through relentless, brutal persecution of everyone who was not a Muslim. Now then, let's change to modern times. All of that work stops in 1922. This works off a database of 19,000 jihad attacks since 9/11. There are things like this. I know the date, the country, the city, how many are killed, how many injured, and a description. Now, when you present a guy like me with 19,000 pieces of data, I start asking questions. How do we make this make sense? So let's make it make sense. This, by the way, is where all these took place. I just think that's interesting. And you'll notice something. This is the Islamic world, and it all centers around it. But notice how much is happening in Europe. Okay. I take the data and I parse it and I divide it. I use Islamic doctrine to analyze this data. What does Islam insist on? Well, in my first lecture, I told you they're fixated on the kafir, right? So I use the kafir to analyze this data from an Islamic standpoint. See, I'm the ultimate multiculturalist. No, really. I'm the only person you've ever met who analyzes Islam on the basis of Islam. Here we go. Here we have, in the last 10 years, the total number of attacks. In the green, we have Muslim on Muslim violence. You mean a Muslim will kill a Muslim? Really? They're doing it in Syria as we speak, right? Remember Iran, Iraq? Okay. Then we have the only one I care about. I mean, my motto here is sell weapons and intelligence to the loser. I'm very serious. You think I'm joking. Okay, here's our story right here. Stays pretty level. That's interesting. By the way, there's hardly a day in which there's not a jihad attack. Modern jihad is relentless, just like classical. Oh, by the way, one of the things this curve proves right here, Islam is bad for Kafirs. Islam is bad for Muslims. Islam is bad for Muslim and non-Muslim. That's what this data shows us. You want to argue with that? Okay, modern jihad is relentless. But what did we see in the other battle map? It was relentless. There are two types of jihad, against the kafir and against Muslim. You see, every time they kill a Muslim, the reason in Syria they're killing other Muslims, they're not real Muslims. Okay? Now then, we've introduced, however, a new phenomena. The mom and pop non-state jihadi shop. Okay? All of those battles up to 1922 were out of the caliph. Okay? We now have non-state jihad. That is all that is different. Okay, jihad attacks per year. I just chose the top 4 nations. But this doesn't really give us what we want because Israel's teeny-weeny and India's great big, so let's do this on per capita. Now then, Israel, I bet you were surprised about Thailand. You didn't know that Thailand was getting whacked on a regular basis, did you? And look, here's a Christian nation, the Philippines, ranks number 3. And then India was Hindu. Oops, wait a minute. Do you know what I just told you? Jihad is against the Jew, the Buddhist, the Christian, and the Hindu. This is the data. Now you go to these dialogues, these multicultural smoozes they have, where the preacher and the rabbi and the imam show up. The preacher and the rabbi show up to tie. The Muslim shows up to win. And then what does the Muslim tell them? Oh, the Christians and the Jews, they're people of the book. Oh, we're brothers in the religion of Abraham with the Christian and the Jew. You know, we're practically the same. We're brothers in Abraham. How's that stuff work out? Well, here's one of your people of the book. Here's another people of the book. Turns out they'll kill a Jew, a Buddhist, a Christian, or a Hindu just as fast as they will another. So much for being brothers in the religion of Abraham. The data does not support the theory. Therefore, the theory is wrong. There is no brotherhood of Abraham except in the minds of people who occupy pulpits. The jihad is against the Jew, the Buddhist, the Christian, the Hindu, and the secularists, by the way. The secularists are the worst of all. Well, maybe worse than the Hindu. It gets hard to know, you know, I mean, really. It's against all kafirs. That's who the jihad is against. The religion of peace. Here we go. 548 battles, 19,000 jihad attacks. In 12 decades, in 1,400 years that are jihad-free. Therefore, Islam is 91% violence and 9% peace. So George Bush was 9% right when he declared religion of peace. Constant violence is why? There's a doctrine. The doctrine of jihad is found in the Sirah, the Quran, and the Hadith, which produces jihad, and it produces this effect of the collapse of civilizations. Here you go. Tears of jihad. 270 million dead over 1,400 years. Read them and weep. Read them and weep. The doctrine drives history. History shows the true nature of political Islam. Political Islam is the enemy of all Kafir nations. There's an intellectual history. In 1,400 years, I've read a lot of old documents. They never talk about the Muslim. They talk about the Arab, the Turk, the Moor, Al-Qaeda, Asian, and it's always been by specialists. And today, all the established specialists are apologists for Islam. Why was the Quran code not cracked in recently? How come we don't teach Muhammad? And why is the Golden Age propaganda taught? Why do we remain ignorant and keep suffering? I maintain there's a reason for this. I maintain that this constant brutality over the centuries has produced in the Western mind the equivalent of the abused dog, the beaten wife, and the raped child. We do not think correctly. Everybody's seen the beaten dog that when you approach it? That is the Western mind. We deny the attacks. How much jihad is ever reported? The churches will not even admit that a Christian suffers anywhere. Fear. Muhammad used fear. Any public critic of Islam has a certain fear element there. Guilt. Oh, we haven't treated Islam right. If we treated them better, everything would be good. We don't teach the history. We humiliated. Who here is going to go home and brag about how your ancestors were slaves, how your history was annihilated, and that all we teach is the lie of the Golden Age? Have you not noticed since 9/11 how bitter and angry politics has gotten? The reason is we're not allowed to get angry at the enemy, so we get cranky with each other. We're powerless. Anybody want to debate about this? The abuser. Muslims will not admit they sold a single slave or ever killed a person. They're arrogant and self-confident. Islam is perfect. Word Islam means submit. They expect submission out of us, and they get it. Islam is the victim. After 9/11, I heard this. The real victims of 9/11 were the Muslims. You've heard that anywhere? After 1,400 years of jihad, brutality, enslavement, theft, deception, rape, annihilation, and insults, the Kafir mind has become identical to that of an abused victim. Our only solution is to face our history and welcome it and embrace it.